name is Christian Flores. I am the advising coordinator with Project Upgrads. And so what Project Upgrads is, we are funded through a grant from the U.S. Department of Education. Our main goal is to help students basically get into grad school, specifically those who come from underrepresented communities. And so let's go ahead and move forward. Give kind of a breakdown. I have this QR code here for students who might be interested in following us on Instagram to get more information on future workshops. This is where we post all of our updates. It's kind of our one stop for, where we have our links for appointments, for advising, for our updates on workshops, where we share other campus resources that are available for students. So yeah, if you want to follow us on Instagram, you're more than welcome to. I more than encourage it. And let's go ahead and move forward. I'll go ahead and give it another 10 seconds and we can go ahead and move forward. And we can kind of give a breakdown about what exactly we'll be covering today. There's a ton of technical information. I know that it kind of will seem boring or redundant, but I promise you it's all very important moving forward, especially as you apply for financial aid going into the graduate school process, that the information that I'll be covering today. All right, so kind of just to give you a breakdown of the agenda, I'll be talking about, what financial aid looks like as an undergraduate student versus a graduate student, what kind of funding is available, in terms of loans, scholarships, and what the financial aid application looks like. And then also what FAFSA is, and then what the California DREAM Act for financial aid, and what kinds of funding are provided. And I'll go ahead and do almost like a walkthrough of the FAFSA application for students, as far as what that looks like. So we can kind of take a look at it together. And I can answer any questions that you all might have if this is your first run around with FAFSA at the graduate student level. So kind of going over it, what is the difference between funding for graduate students as opposed to undergraduate students? So as a graduate student, you're no longer eligible for federal grants. You are, though, eligible still for some of the same perks rather as being a student. There are some state grants available. You still are eligible for student loans. Scholarships are still available, and federal work study programs are all available. One thing is you have to file your FAFSA and California DREAM Act applications, whichever one applies to you. At the graduate level, though, you are eligible for what are called graduate assistantships, fellowships, teaching assistantships, and research assistantships, and they all look different depending on which positions you're signing up for. So it's really important that you're aware of these if those are things you're interested in, and we'll talk a little bit about those as well. So I want to talk a little bit briefly about loans, what those look like, and why it's important to understand loans at the graduate level, because they do differ somewhat from the loans that are available at the undergraduate level as well. So currently we have, and this is actually more updated, this is more recent, I just updated today. You have federal direct unsubsidized loans, and the current rate for that is actually significantly higher than it's been in previous years. So it's important to understand these rates, because those are going to be the rates that start accumulating the second those loans are dispersed into your student accounts to pay off your tuition. So for example, that 5.28%, that is an annual percentage rate for interest on those student loans currently at the federal level. These are the federal financial, student loans. And so in order to get these, you have to have your FAFSA application on file. You have to take, you have to do what's called your loan entrance counseling and your Masterpromissory note. If you have taken out an undergraduate student loan, you might have noticed that those are subsidized student loans. And the difference between those two is that with subsidized student loans, it means that you will not accumulate interest until after you graduate and you start paying those loans. So that's kind of how they differ. Then you have the federal direct plus loan for graduate students. And those are based off of, your credit application and multiple other factors, but those also are significantly higher interest rates than even the unsubsidized loans. And then you can also, go and pursue private loans as well. So it's not just the federal student loans that you can pursue. If you choose, you can pursue private loans through maybe your financial institution, your private bank. And those, those generally vary in interest rates depending on your credit, or if you have a co-signer, their credit as well. But those are sometimes, things that people kind of stray away from nowadays. But they're still an option. They're still out there also, depending on, if you want to go private universities tend to be more expensive. So it's something to take into consideration as well. But if you're kind of staying at the CSU level, there are other options. Where maybe student loans are not your first going to be your first glance. And I want to kind of talk about why it's important to think about these student loans, and important to be realistic about your financial needs. What are your expenses going to look like? Tuition, books, supplies, gas, rent. And it's important to remember that loans need to be paid back. So don't look at the first number on the student loan offer and be like, oh, I'm going to take out all these student loans because I'm gonna, take a trip to Cancun or Tulum. Think about, the fact that you do have to pay this money back. And so these student loans can affect how your life is going to look like after graduation, depending on what type of job you land, because these monthly payments are income-based for the most part. And so I'm going to go ahead and give you kind of a snapshot of what that looks like in the real world in just a second, because I do want you all to have a real picture of what that looks like. And I'll actually even use my own student loan summary as an example, so you all really do have a realistic picture. This is going to be very realistic. It's going to be like, it's going to shock some of you, I promise, but it's going to give you a realistic picture. And so again, a lot of these student loans are going to affect, even for those of you who aren't homeowners yet, it's going to affect your ability to take out home loans because of something that's called debt to income ratio, how much money you have in debt versus how much money you're making in income. So it's really important to take those factors into consideration when you're thinking about taking out student loans, just because, you might think you might need that extra money. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing this screen just for a second. And I'm going to share just really quickly what this looks like in a realistic world. And this is actually my student loan data, just like, again, so you have a realistic picture of exactly what that looks like. So you can see view breakdown, you can see the loans, and you can see exactly where I went to school, how much I took out, what interest rates were. Right now they're on deferment because of the federal deferments on student loans. I see that Jeffrey has a question. So if Jeffrey, you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Question is this just for your graduate degree, or is this the bachelor's combined, or the undergraduate?
So this is my undergraduate, this is my master's, and this is my my doctorate as well. So I'm finishing my doctorate. So this is
okay.
All 3 degrees combined. This is on the studentaid.gov website. It gives you a whole entire breakdown. It gives you every single piece of government-funded aid that you've ever received, including grants. So this is all 3 degrees for me. It's not just, so it's not just my graduate degree, but again, it gives you a realistic picture of what the accumulation looks like of student loans when you don't think about it consciously. You think about, oh, it's only, $10,000 this year. It's only $20,000. And you're like, all of a sudden, it adds up. And it's important to really think about these factors when you're moving forward into student debt and you're thinking about these student loans. So let's go ahead and go back to this screen, and let's go ahead and move forward and talk about what other options are out there, because there are. And let's talk about kind of what the repayment period does look like if you do decide to take out student loans. So when you graduate, you are given a 6-month grace period. So you have 6 months from the time you graduate to the time that you have to start paying those back. And so the reason that is a lot of students don't have a job right away. So a lot of students are looking for jobs, they're applying. And so even though for these unsubsidized loans that you are given that grace period, you're still accumulating that debt. Even despite the fact that you have a grace period. And then you can go for what's called deferment or forbearance, say maybe you lose your job. you can apply for forbearance or deferment, so where you don't have to pay back those loans right away because you're unemployed. And so what happens there is you still keep accumulating interest. So maybe you might have paid off a certain amount of money already on those loans, but now you're accumulating interest again. And so that might have been for no reason, now because you're going through forbearance or deferment. And then there is income-driven repayment plans where you're repaying back by according to how much you earn. And so maybe you still aren't making as much as you could be making in your field. It's not going to seem like it's chipping away at a lot of that student loan debt that's accumulating. But there are also other kind of advantages that you could take depending on which fields you're in, which are these that I'm going to be talking about briefly, which are student loan forgiveness programs, which we've all heard in the news lately about them kind of being revamped, especially, the public servant loan forgiveness. And so what this means is you have to be employed by a public entity or a nonprofit. You have to work full-time for that agency. You have to have those direct loans. So those unsubsidized loans or subsidized loans, all those loans, the kinds that I just showed you, they cannot be private loans. So they can't be through like their bank or anything. They have to be government funded loans. And you have to be under those income-driven repayment plans. And you have to make at least 120 qualifying payments. And they don't have to be consecutive. They don't have to be back-to-back. You can go through deferment if you lose your job or if you stop working and then go back to the force. Or maybe you, for a lot of folks, they go through paternal leave, paternity leave or maternity leave or whatever, whatever the case is. And they have to stop making payments for a period of time and then they start making payments again. So as long as you make 120 qualifying payments, even if they are not consecutive, you can apply for that program. Then there's teacher loan forgiveness programs, which again, it's very similar to the public service loan forgiveness. And it's for those who are employed within the education system, whether it be elementary school, secondary school, or any other service agency that provides education to low-income students. So basically, what happens is after 5 years of consecutive employment in those schools, you qualify for that loan forgiveness. And more information is available on the studentaid.gov website about what that looks like. But again, there have been issues in the past about what student loan forgiveness looks like for these, and a lot of people have been denied, but now they're revamping that program, so there's more of a probability that people will be going, through forgiveness, thankfully. But for those of you maybe who don't plan on going into the public sector, who are planning on going through the private sector, this might not be an option for you because that's not kind of your career plan. Maybe you want to think about something else like scholarships. And so we have the Graduate Equity Fellowship, which with this one, what this does is it provides you funding between anywhere from $500 to $2,000 per year. And basically what the reason that it's there for is it encourages those who are seeking a doctorate degree, and it provides those funding opportunities and helping them basically find success. And the good thing about this is that it's not based off of like grades or anything. It's more so based off of financial need. And so what would happen is once you file your FAFSA or your CDA, you would have what's called your expected family contribution. As long as your EFC is less than $1,000, you would qualify for this Graduate Equity Fellowship. And you would have to demonstrate your capability to succeed in a graduate degree program. And so there has not been a deadline set for this application, but it's normally sometime in the spring around May time. So you still have time to think about this if you're going to go ahead and apply for it. And it's an opportunity if you don't want to go ahead and take out student loans. Again, this is not the only opportunity, but we have more to talk about. But again, this is definitely an option for you folks. Another one would be the Palante Fellowship Program, which is actually through the program that I work with. And I am actually the coordinator for this fellowship. And so what would happen here is you must be enrolled in a graduate program here at Fullerton. It's works with those students who are in the College of ECS, so Engineering and Computer Science, HHD, Health and Human Development, Humanities and Social Sciences, or NSM, which is Natural Sciences and Mathematics. And we choose, along with the coordinators for these colleges, 48 students who have, again, filed their FAFSA applications, who are US citizens, permanent residents, or eligible for AB 540. So you can be, DACA or undocumented, et cetera. As long as you have AB 540 eligibility, then you can qualify for this. And you get $1,000 per year that you receive this. You can only receive it for 1 year. And you get $500 per semester. And so it's a fellowship. So you would be required to attend meetings and workshops, but these workshops help you with your career in the long run because you are paired with a faculty mentor. This mentor helps guide you in leading up to graduation, kind of with preparing you basically for the job force. And so that's really one of the nice things about this fellowship is that you're being guided along the way. It's not just the funding aspect, you're given an experience. So this is also another opportunity for those of you who might be interested in funding that's not just loans. And then there's a state university grant. And the state university grant is actually another amazing opportunity. It's only available for CSU students. So it's a CSU grant specifically for those of you who have filed for FAFSA or California Dream Act before March 2nd. You must be a California resident to receive this. Or be eligible for AB 540. And so what this grant does is it covers the state university fees at any CSU, any of the 23 campuses. And so the eligibility is determined by your FAFSA application. As long as you have financial aid need of your EFC is less than 4,000, then you're eligible for this. You must be enrolled at least half time, which for a grad student is 6 units. And it covers up to 125% of your grad program. And so the really cool thing about this, again, is it will cover your tuition across any of the 23 campuses. So you could attend Fullerton or LA or Dominguez or Long Beach. And you would be eligible to receive this. And so the only thing you'd be paying out of pocket would be the fees that are tacked onto the tuition. So like the student union fee, the student recreation center fee, the student health center fee, all those extra fees that are tacked on. And depending on which CSU campus you're applying to, it could vary in cost. The cheapest CSU, their fees per semester is about $150 per semester. And the most expensive CSU is almost $400 per semester. So you wouldn't be seeing anything exceed those costs per semester out of pocket if you were to receive the state university grant. So those campuses are Cal State LA and Cal State Bakersfield, which is the most expensive one. Cal State LA has the cheapest fees. So Cal State Fullerton kind of falls right in the middle. So that's kind of what you'd be looking at receiving the state university grant. If you're receiving currently the Pell Grant as an undergrad, you'd most likely be receiving the state university grant as a grad student. And it's not guaranteed, but most likely it's a possibility that you would be eligible for this funding. So that's something to take into consideration. And again, so this kind of leads into the FAFSA application, which is why it's important to file this before the priority deadline, which again is March 2nd. Because if you don't file this application, or for others, the California Dream Act application, then you aren't going to be eligible for the funding that is available. This is really key to that funding. So let's go ahead and start talking about this application. So with FAFSA, it stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. The priority deadline to file is March 2nd every year. And again, you would file through fafsa.ed.gov. And if you have a FAFSA ID, so Federal Student Aid ID, then that's what you would use to log in. If you have a student aid website ID, it would be the same one. So the same website that I was just on to view like my student loans, it's the same ID for that. And eligibility is to be a US citizen or eligible non-citizen and to have a valid social security number. So those are the two pieces of key eligibility to be able to file for FAFSA. If you aren't eligible for FAFSA and you maybe are undocumented or are, are eligible for, the DREAM Act, then this is kind of for you. And you don't have to say if you are or not again. So this is to receive that, You have to be AB 540 eligible, and to be AB 540 eligible, it means that you have to be eligible for non-resident tuition, or exempt rather from non-resident. It would make you exempt from non-resident tuition at post-secondary institutions, so at a college or university. You must have attended a California school for more than 3 years. So it could have been anywhere from K through 12. It could have been 3 years of high school, any of that stuff. So it would make you, any of these would make you eligible for AB 540. You must have graduated from a California high school or the equivalent, and you must be enrolled in a public college in California. So those are the important key factors here. So if you're attending a CSU, that would be a public college, even a community college, but for most of you, obviously that would not apply here because you're already looking into grad schools. And you have to file an affidavit with the college to certify that you do have the intent that you will file or have the intent to file, legal immigration status, even if you don't have it currently. So even if you are undocumented and you don't have legal status, then you just have to file an affidavit saying, I'm going to do it. So again, this is all discrete information. No one's going to, release any of this information. This is kind of just one of those things that just, you have to do in order to be eligible for AB 540 and the California DREAM Act. And this allows for you to receive in-state tuition, as well as be eligible for the California DREAM Act, which you can apply through the dream.csac.california.gov, which the CSAC stands for California Student Aid Commission, which basically they're the ones who fund the Cal Grant A, Cal Grant B, all those Cal Grants. They're basically the ones who process those. And again, the deadline for that is March 2nd. So it's important that you are looking into that if your goal is to get funding as well. So we're going to go ahead and quickly just walk through the FAFSA application, what that looks like, and kind of talk about it, answer any questions you might have. Before I start this process, I just want to let you all know you're going to receive a survey link at the end of this workshop. And I hope that you all can complete it just to kind of give feedback from you all about your experience and whatnot. And so we can have that on file because again, we are funded through a grant from the U.S. Department of Education. And so that really helps us a lot. So just a reminder. So once again, this is the walkthrough, and I'm going to go ahead and, as of now, these are screenshots, and then we'll go to the actual application. When you go onto the main website, this is what it looks like when you log on. And so you're going to click on, you want to file your application. So, you would click here where it says apply for aid, and there'd be a drop down, or you can click start here, and it would take you to the next page, which looks like this. And you would click on whichever ones applies to you. For most of you, it would be I'm a student who wants to access the FAFSA form, right? And so that's what you would click, that's what you would select. And so you would be applying for 2022 or 2023. And so that's how you would select, and you would start, I think you would renew your FAFSA, and you would update any information that's no longer relevant to your previous one, and you create your save key, which is pretty standard. I'm pretty sure most of you have already been through this process before. And if you haven't, that's okay. We'll kind of go through it again. And so it kind of gives you the introduction, kind of what is FAFSA, and kind of what is a save key, how long is it going to take. A FAFSA application normally takes anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes max, and that's depending on if you have the information on hand, and I'll tell you what that kind of looks like. And so here, you're going to enter your personal information and verify that it's correct, including your social security number, because again, part of filing for your FAFSA is to have a valid social security number. So that's really important to make sure that you have that on file with your FAFSA application. You'd enter this information. I see someone has a comment. If you have been applying already, do we have to do this all again? So if you're, you have to apply every single year. So just keep in mind, if you have not applied for next year and you're applying to grad school, you still have to reapply. So you'd have to renew your FAFSA. And we're gonna go over it and and look over the application as to what that looks like too. So this is just kind of like a brief recap of what that looks like before we go forward into the actual website. And then you'd go and, make sure all your information is correct. It's, standard protocol, your mailing address. It's asking you, have you lived in California for at least 5 years? Yes, no. Are you a US citizen? You click which one applies to you. And then it's going to ask you about your, what will your high school completion status be when you begin college in the 2022-2023 year? And so for all of you, it should be graduated. What college degree or certificate will you be working on when you begin the 2022-2023 school year? Here you're going to select, it's going to say something along the lines of a graduate degree. And that's what you're going to want to select. Because when it does that, it's going to prompt you to enter all the questions related to a graduate student. And that's exactly what you want. All right. And so here it says, will you have your first bachelor's degree before you begin the 2022-2023 school year? For all of you, it should ideally be yes, because in order to be entering grad school for this school year, you have to have your bachelor's degree. And it says, what will your college grade level be when you begin the 2022-2023 year? It would be for first year graduate student for most of you. If you're renewing as a second year graduate student, then you can go ahead and enter whichever one applies to you. But again, enter the information that is most relevant to you in this circumstance. And then are you interested in being considered for work study? If that's something that you really want to be considered for, then by all means click yes. If you don't, then click no. And if you don't know, then that's okay. You can click don't know. But work study, again, goes back to those GA ships, those graduate assistantships, those TA ships, those research assistantships. If that's something you're interested in, then you can click yes. And those are really awesome opportunities to work with faculty, to work with administrators on campus. And the cool thing about work study is that you actually are receiving a paycheck for your work. It's not directly funding your financial aid, your tuition. You're actually getting a paycheck every month for the work that you're doing on campus. So it goes straight into your pocket. So if that's something you're interested in, you can go ahead and click yes. If not, then that's okay. It's not going to penalize you for selecting no or don't know. For student selective services, are you male or female? And this is talking about biological sex, not gender. So make sure you're selecting whichever one applies to you. And it's going to ask you if you've, about your parents' education. If you don't want to enter information about them, that's totally okay. It'll give you an option to say don't know or unsure. Have you ever received federal student aid? You can click yes or no, if whichever one applies to you. And again, it's going to ask, have you ever been convicted of or of the possession or sale of illegal drugs? Again, this is very standard. It's just asking you because if you select yes, then it does disqualify you from aid. But again, most of you should not be in those. And if you are, that's totally okay. So this, again, you're going to receive this. I'm going to come back to this slide, but we're going to go ahead and go onto the actual financial aid workshop or website rather. So we can kind of look at what the financial aid website looks like. So let me go ahead and log in. Let me go ahead and see. Sorry, folks. It logged me out. So let's go ahead. When you log in, it'll take you to a screen that looks a little bit like the screen that I showed you before, which is this one, right? And so what we're going to do is complete the FAFSA form. And completing the FAFSA form, fill it out now. Start here. If you're a returning user, you can go ahead and click here. For me, I am a returning user. So I click this one because this one applies to me. And it's just loading right now. So I have already filed my application, but we're going to go ahead and edit it so you can kind of see what it looks like. Let's see. And don't worry, it does cover any personal information because the sections that I want to go over are more, let's see. Let's see. All right, give me one sec. All right. So we're going to go ahead. We already went over this student demographics section. So we're going to go ahead and look over the school selection part, right? So, it asks us for your high school, and you can verify that the information is correct. Because you've already, you're renewing your FAFSA, it should already have this information on file. So this is the name of my high school that I went to when I was in high school. It's going to have that on file because it asked you when you were an undergraduate for that information, right? It's going to ask you for which schools you're submitting a FAFSA application. So even if you haven't applied or submitted your applications yet, you can still file your application now for FAFSA. And so what you would do is you would add the schools. I only have one because I'm already a student at one. That's where I'm going to school for my doctorate. But in your case, if you know all the schools that you're going to attend, you can add all schools and you can select, California, Fullerton, and you can do the search. And it would be California State University, Fullerton, and continue, right? And select housing, whichever one is relevant to you, on campus or off campus. If there's graduate housing on campus, then next section, right? And that's it. That's all it's going to ask you. So it's going to ask you all about your marital status. If you're married, you're going to put married. If you're single, then you're single. The one thing that's really important is that your parents' income is no longer going to be a factor as a graduate student. If it was a factor in the past, you're now considered independent. You're no longer considered dependent on your parents' information. So if even if your parents can still claim you, you're now considered independent. And the reason being is now that you have a bachelor's degree, you're considered in this aspect, you're now considered independent from them. And so, you're gonna be single. Does a student live with, does a student have dependents? If you have children, then you would of course click yes. Do you support anyone else? Do you have dependents other than your children or spouse? Maybe you have someone that you take care of, maybe an elderly family member, or maybe a sibling. And so if none of these apply to you, then your household size would be 1, right? And so you are considered an independent student. So you are a lot. So for me, this is kind of breaking it down. Why? And so do you want to answer questions about your parents? I'm going to click no, because it doesn't matter in my case whether or not I do, because I am independent, right? Going to the next section, right? So it skips everything about parent demographics and parent financials, and it goes straight to mine. And so it says, I must provide my student financial information from 2020. That's what it's going to pull from. And so I've already completed my taxes from that year. And so I transfer them from the IRS. And so how do I do that exactly? So it's going to ask me, do I want to transfer my income from the IRS? And so when it's a student filing, it's going to give me a little option to go into the IRS website and pull all that information and extract all that data, right? And so after that's said and done, it's going to pull and input all that information here. All right. And then you can, and that's it. That's all you have to do. And you can click next section. And for me, because I'm technically just doing an update, there's no change. That's all I'm doing. I can click continue. That's it, right? It should be fairly easy because most of you will be renewing your FAFSA. You're just updating the schools, you're updating any financial information. It's asking you what kind of degree you're pursuing, etc. So that's all you really have to do. And then you sign the FAFSA form, right? You click that you approve and you submit your FAFSA form, and that's it. It's going to give you what's called a SAR, which is student aid report, and it's going to tell you what your expected family contribution is. And so you can go ahead and look and see expected family contribution, and it tells you how much your family can contribute to you and your education. So for me, it's 0, which means that I can receive the max amount of aid. And so here it tells me that I can receive an estimated $20,500 per year in student loans, right? And it says I may be eligible to receive other kinds of aid, like grants, state grants, federal grants, scholarships, and our work study opportunities. And so that's basically it, right? That's all that I really have to do. I've kind of taken care of it. I don't know if there are questions. I'm going to stop sharing. Again, just as a reminder, you are going to receive a survey after this workshop. I know I kind of went over it kind of quick, but that's all you need to do is go in there and do the renewal. Again, I know that it's quite a bit of information to cover as far as funding opportunities. There are also other opportunities for funding on the Graduate Studies website. If you go to fullerton.edu/graduate and you go to funding, there are all these other opportunities that are available as well, which again includes a Palante Fellowship, the Graduate Equity Fellowship, and all these other opportunities for funding as a graduate student. And then I see I do have a question, so you're welcome, Jeffrey. Are there any other questions that I might be able to answer? I know, again, I went over this really fairly quickly, but it is a simple process as far as the actual filing part for the FAFSA application itself, but then kind of finding other funding opportunities is the most confusing part. Once, for example, if it comes down to you taking out student loans, that is a little bit more tricky. You do have to complete 8 processes like the Master Promissory Note, the loan entrance counseling, which again can be found on the FAFSA website. And I'll go ahead and show you where to find those. Again, when you're on the FAFSA website, make sure you go to complete 8 process, and you're going to click on MPN, which is Master Promissory Note for graduate and professional students. And it's going to take you here, and you need to complete this form. So MPN for subsidized and unsubsidized loans. And then the next form that you would complete is complete entrance counseling. And then so you'd select I am a graduate or professional student, and you'd start that. That is what you need to do in order to accept those loans and for those loans to be processed. Otherwise, they're not going to get dispersed and the university is not going to know that you need those loans.
What was the one before entrance counseling called?
It's called a Master Promissory Note. And it's going to be on the same tab as it's going to say complete aid process.
Okay.
And so it's going to be abbreviated though as MPN. So make sure that you just kind of take note MPN and you're going to select that and fill that out. And it's basically an agreement saying I'm going to pay back my student loans once I'm no longer enrolled in school full time. That's kind of what the agreement is. Does anyone have any questions about funding or financial aid as a graduate student? Again, I know that this is quite a bit of information, and I know many of you are kind of now hopeful with the State University grant and that availability for funding as well.
As far as the loan forgiveness, as I work for a nonprofit right now, do you know, and if you may not know, as far as will that have any forbearance on, because I know I have to pay the for like 5 years you have to pay the loan back. Does that dictate at all what the amount will be paid, or is that specifically decided by FAFSA what I'll be paying back?
So when you go into doing the loan entrance counseling, it'll give you a simulation of your income, because you're going to enter your income, your estimated income and how much loans you already have versus how much more you're going to be taking out. And it'll kind of give you, because these are based off of income-driven repayments. So any kind of repayments you're going to be doing for the loan forgiveness process, it is going to be income driven. So you're not going to be paying basically more than you can afford to pay.
Awesome. Thank you, Christian.
Yeah. And so again, this is all something that I've been through as a student. And so I've kind of seen that back end personally. And so with that, the student loan forgiveness aspect, I haven't gotten there yet, but from what we've seen a lot being talked about in the news about that student loan forgiveness process and how many people have been turned down. But it's really important to make sure that you are paying those it's almost like as soon as you can, in order for you to be eligible for that as soon as you can.
Yeah, I was going to stop at the bachelor's, but it's just this opportunity came up at work. So, and I figure I'll just be looking 3 years would pass and I'd be going, why didn't I just get my master's? So,
Yeah, one thing I recommend as well is maybe talking to your employer and seeing if they offer tuition reimbursement as well.
they do. I got to look
And,
into that too. So yeah.
and going that route, a lot of employers do offer employee tuition reimbursement as well. So that's also something you can look into as well, especially if you're going to go the student loan route. A lot of people take out student loans to cover the upfront costs, and then they go back in there and pay off the student loan in a lump sum with what they get reimbursed from their employers.
Yeah, that was my plan. So,
yeah, are there any other questions from anyone, any folks out there?
Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for stopping by, for being here, for asking questions. Again, I hope that this gave you the information that you needed. Again, if you have not yet filed your FAFSA and you know exactly where you're applying to school, whether it be Fullerton or any other university, you can start applying for FAFSA ASAP. As of October 1st, that portal has opened. So you don't need to even have your graduate applications filed. As long as you know where you're going, you can go in there and add those schools to your list of schools. When you submit your applications for those schools, it'll link them with your application for FAFSA because of your social security number or any other identifying number. And there's no penalty for submitting a school. Maybe you don't decide you're not going to apply to that school after all. There's no penalty for that. And you can always go in, maybe you're going to apply to an additional school. You can always go in there and update those. But I recommend you highly submitting those FAFSA applications as soon as you know where you're going to go and like in the back of your mind. And if there are no other questions, then just as a reminder that you're going to be receiving the survey to your email. Make sure that you're looking out for that. If not, then I have that survey here. Actually, that's not the right one. I want to go make sure I send you the right one. Give me 1 second. I have the right one. I'm actually going to post it in a link in the chat box as well. That way you all have it and can complete it for me, because that actually would help me tremendously. So give me 1 second. All right, that is the link. So if you all could complete this survey, that would be amazing. And that's all I have for you folks after this. So yeah.
Have a great holiday, everybody.
Thank you, you too, Jeffrey.